Thank you. I think Ryan's trying to get in my room. 1 second. Let me tell him I'll be right back.
In order to heighten worker productivity. So if you've ever had a job with a defined number of bathroom breaks, that's why. Also, Taylorism found its way into classrooms, and anyone who's ever had to sit in rows for 45-minute periods punctuated by factory-style bells knows that this atmosphere is not particularly conducive to a sense of freedom. Now, this is a little bit confusing because while responding to worker exploitation was part of the progressive movement, so was Taylorism itself, because it was an application of research, observation, and expertise to the vexing problem of how to increase productivity. And this use of scientific experts is another hallmark of the progressive era, one that usually found its expression in politics. American progressives, like their counterparts in the green sections of Not America, sought government solutions to social problems. Germany, which is somewhere over here, pioneered social legislation with its minimum wage, unemployment insurance, and old age pension laws. But the idea that government action could address the problems and insecurities that characterize the modern industrial world also became prominent in the United States. And the notion that an activist government could enhance rather than threaten people's freedom was something new in America. Now, progressives pushing for social legislation tended to have more success at the state and local level, especially in cities, which established public control over gas and water and raised taxes to pay for transportation and public schools, whereas federally, the biggest success was like prohibition, which, not that successful. But anyway, if all that local collectivist investment sounds like socialism, it kind of is. I mean, by 1912, the Socialist Party had 150,000 members and had elected scores of local officials like Milwaukee Mayor Emil Seidel. Some urban progressives even pushed to get rid of traditional democratic forms altogether. A number of cities were run by commissions of experts or city managers who would be chosen on the basis of some demonstrated expertise or credential rather than their ability to hand out turkeys at Christmas or find jobs for your nephew's sister's cousin. Progressive editor Walter Lippmann argued for applying modern scientific expertise to solve social problems in his 1914 book Drift and Mastery, writing that scientifically trained experts, quote, could be trusted more fully than ordinary citizens to solve America's deep social problems. This tension between government by experts and increased popular democratic participation is one of the major contradictions of the progressive era. The 17th Amendment allowed for senators to be elected directly by the people rather than by state legislatures, and many states adopted primaries to nominate candidates, again taking power away from political parties and putting it in the hands of voters. And some states, particularly Western ones like California, adopted aspects of even more direct democracy, the initiative, which allowed voters to put issues on the ballot, and the referendum, which allows them to vote on laws directly. And lest you think that more democracy is always good, I present you with California. But many progressives wanted actual policy made by experts who knew what was best for the people, not the people themselves. And despite primaries and direct elections of senators, it's hard to argue that the progressive era was a good moment for democratic participation, since many progressives were only in favor of voting insofar as it was done by white, middle-class Protestant voters. All right, let's go to the thought bubble. Progressives limited immigrants' participation in the political process through literacy tests and laws requiring people to register to vote. Voter registration was supposedly intended to limit fraud and the power of political machines. Stop me if any of this sounds familiar, but it actually just suppressed voting generally. Voting gradually declined from 80% of male Americans voting in the 1890s to the point where today only about 50% of eligible Americans vote in presidential elections. But an even bigger blow to democracy during the progressive era came with the Jim Crow laws passed by legislatures in southern states, which legally segregated the South. First, there was the deliberate disenfranchisement of African Americans. The 15th Amendment made it illegal to deny the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude, but said nothing about the ability to read, so many southern states instituted literacy requirements. Other states added poll taxes, requiring people to pay to vote, which effectively disenfranchised a large number of African American people who were disproportionately poor. The Supreme Court didn't help. In 1896, it made one of its most famous bad decisions, Plessy versus Ferguson, ruling that segregation in public accommodations, in Homer Plessy's case, a railroad car, did not violate the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. As long as black railroad cars were equal to white ones, it was a-okay to have duplicate sets of everything. Now, creating two sets of equal quality of everything would get really expensive, so southern states didn't actually do it. Black schools, public restrooms, public transportation opportunities, the list goes on, would definitely be separate and definitely not equal. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Now, of course, as we've seen, progressive ideas inspired a variety of responses, both for Taylorism and against it, both for government by experts and for direct democracy. Similarly, in the progressive era, just as the Jim Crow laws were being passed, there were many attempts to improve the lives of African Americans. The towering figure in this movement to uplift black Southerners was Booker T. Washington, a former slave who became the head of the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, a center for vocational education. And Washington urged Southern black people to emphasize skills that could make them successful in the contemporary economy. The idea was that they would earn the respect of white people by demonstrating their usefulness, and everyone would come to respect each other through the recognition of mutual dependence while continuing to live in separate social spheres. But Washington's accommodationist stance was not shared by all African Americans. W.E.B. Du Bois advocated for full civil and political rights for black people and helped to found the NAACP, which urged African Americans to fight for their rights through, quote, persistent, manly agitation. So I wanted to talk about the progressive era today, not only because it shows up on a lot of tests, but because progressives tried to tackle many of the issues that we face today, particularly concerning immigration and economic justice, and they used some of the same methods that we use today: organization, journalistic exposure, and political activism. Now, we may use Tumblr or Tea Party forums, but the same concerns motivate us to work together. And just as today, many of their efforts were not successful because of the inherent difficulty in trying to mobilize very different interests in a pluralistic nation. In some ways, their platforms would have been better suited to an America that was less diverse and complex, but it was that very diversity and complexity that gave rise and still gives rise to the urge toward progress in the first place. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. Crash Course is produced and directed by Stan Muller. Our script supervisor is Meredith Danko. The associate.
Okay, I know that was long, and like I said earlier, I know you guys aren't super big fans of that, but a lot of good stuff in there, and a lot of the stuff we'll talk about today, we're not going to hit on all of it because I can't talk that fast, and I want to explain it a little bit more detail, a little less fast, I guess. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is our key vocabulary is progressivism. That's the term that we're going to really focus on today, and movement that responded to the pressures of industrialization and urbanization by promoting reforms. And like he said at the end of that clip, that video, is a lot of this era is really reflecting what's going on in our society today and for the past like 10, 15 years or so. A lot of people are trying to change a lot of the problems that have been going on. And so we have a lot of people who are fighting different battles. People want to fix certain things. They don't want to fix other things, and so we have a lot of people with different agendas all fighting each other more than normal in history. But I think in the case of this progressivism, it was because, like he said also, they went from listening to music and doing their dishes and doing their clothes in the 1850s, the same as they did 10,000 years ago, to having washing machines and listening to the radio and doing this kind of stuff by the 1900s. So in that 50 years, everything changes so fast. And in our time, it's really changed so fast since the internet came about, and it changed everything in that way. Because when I grew up, I didn't have a cell phone. They were barely existent. They had these really gigantic cell phones that were like this big and like this wide. They might have some connected to a car, but they didn't exist, and the only people who had them were people that were really rich. Okay, this was the invention of the pagers that was going around back then too. Some people had those, but that wasn't a huge thing where I was from either. So that kind of stuff didn't exist. But as the internet starts coming up, we're able to talk. Ryan, you're in freaking South Carolina, excuse my language. And I'm talking to you live right now. You're watching me, and watching this thing I'm showing. So a lot has changed since I graduated college. The internet was literally just coming out in the mid 90s. Okay. So I graduated college in 1996 and the internet was in its infancy years. All right. That's like 25 years ago, and look how much it's changed today with, all this, with Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and all the different social platforms that we have, and Instagram, and then just being able to go on Amazon and buy things like that and it'd be here in a day or two. You know, the world's changed so fast that everybody's trying to really fix things. And so that's kind of how it was back then too. A lot of things you're going to see that are similar, a lot of problems that are similar. And we're going to see these people try to do it themselves too. All right, muckrakers. All right, and this is a bad term. We'll get into it. Writers who uncovers and exposes misconduct in politics or business. So if you ever watch the news, the local news, they always have, like, I think Channel 8 has the I-Team, the investigative unit, and different channels have different people who go behind the scenes to find out stories of corruption, or this guy's doing this at this veterinary clinic, all this kind of bad stuff. These are the kind of things that muckrakers were doing. A settlement house. Settlement houses were community centers organized at the turn of the 20th century to provide social services to the urban poor. So settlement houses are similar to, like, the boys and girls clubs, the Y, that kind of stuff. Just, centers where you can go and get help and that kind of thing. Initiative. Now, these are political terms right here, and I'll get into all of them a little bit more. These are more for government. When you do take your test than they are for U.S. history. But process which citizens put a proposed new law directly on the ballot. So that's literally voters come up with an idea, and if they have enough votes for this thing, for this law to go on the ballot, it'll go on the ballot, and then the people of the state will vote for it. So without the state Congress to do it, the people directly do it. A referendum process that allows citizens to approve or reject a law passed by the legislature. So this is like the people of the state vetoing a law or canceling a law. And this, again, is another separate ballot than the normal ballots. And again, you have to have enough signatures to get a referendum to happen. And a recall, again, this is a thing by the people to remove elected officials from office before their term ends. Okay, and you'll see this in local politics every once in a while, like when a mayor does something, maybe gets a DUI or is caught stealing from the government, they'll have a recall election to try to get that person removed from office. Okay, so let's get into the bulk of it. This is a big slide. I'm not going to read all this. Progressivism movement saw its members come from all political parties, social classes, ethnic groups, religions. We're going to see these people come together, and they all have different problems. And that's why progressivism today and then is so hard, because there's so many problems. Which problems do you focus on? And so different people have different solutions also to the problems. That's just and the same thing today. And that's why people are so divided about it. So the policies led to the progressive movement benefited the wealthy. Some wealthy people also joined the progressive movement as they were driven to desire to act for good of the whole society. So some people, even though they're benefiting, like some rich people, from the problems, like a businessman isn't being taxed, so he's able to sell his stuff cheaper and make more money. Well, he also doesn't have to, maybe have safety equipment. It allows him to make more money because he's not spending that for the equipment. Well, sometimes these same people are saying, well, we probably should put that stuff in, and they're joining the Progressive Party. The common belief, industrialization and urbanization had created troubling social and political problems. So the rapid rise of cities is going to be a big problem. All right. And the rapid rise of industry is going to be a big problem. And these problems, since they're brand new problems, they've never happened before, nobody really had that concrete answer. And that's what this whole era is about. Okay, so the goals. There's a whole bunch of goals, like I've said. One of them is the women wanting to gain the right to vote. We're not really going to talk about that today, but we will get into it. Honest government, especially at the local level. There has been a lot of corruption before this in government. There's a lot of corruption now in government. I think our government is ridiculously corrupt, but I don't have facts to back me up, but I know these people are getting ridiculously rich while they're in power for 30 years. That shouldn't happen. Problems. Okay, another goal of progressivism, we're going to see African American rights, but again, that's with the women's. That's going to be next week. I think, and then further on in another unit. Okay, problems. Here's some of the problems. People lived in crowded cities. They need paved streets, safe drinking water, decent housing, adequate municipal services, so electric, sewer, other utilities. Okay, more problems. They distribution of wealth that occurred due to industrialization.
Caleb Clack down at Discovery.
Okay.
It's gonna be
Hold on
paper
one second.
thin.
Okay,
It's gonna need government and or personal finance.
gotcha. Okay, so we're seeing, and we've continued to see the same problem. They haven't fixed this one, is the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. And that was one of the things that this progressive movement tries to fix. But since it's still happening today, they weren't very successful. And it seems to be happening more today at a bigger rate than it did then. Wealthy business owners grew even more wealthy. That's what I just said. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So not enough for the factory workers to actually rise up and help their social status because they're getting paid so little. All right. So let's look at this end of course question. I'm going to ask you guys to answer it now. Then you'll have the answer for your homework. So how did the distribution of wealth in the United States change due to industrialization in the late 19th century? Okay, what do you guys think? First one, industrialists grew rich while factory workers remained poor. Many industrialists created profit sharing plans for their employees, Women wages for factory jobs became equal to men's wages, or Congress passed legislation required to industries to pay a minimum wage. Which one do you think it is, guys?
The industrialists grew rich while the factory workers remained poor.
All right, Ian, do you agree with that? Are you awake, Ayana? I know it's been boring. Ayana agrees. So I agree as well. Industrialists grew rich while factory workers remained poor. I'm going to put that back so you don't see that. So hopefully you paid attention. You'll get it right again. All right, let's talk about muckrakers. So we're going to see these socially conscious journalists. As you see, this guy's got a rake. They clean manure. This term was coined by President Roosevelt. It says at the bottom, they're basically, he said they're raking up crap. That's why they're called muck rakers, like muck as in, it's another word for crap. So that's what they're doing. So it's basically they're investigative reporters. They're writing newspaper stories. They're writing books. They talked about Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. I got it right here. If any of you want to read it, it's here. Apparently it made John Green vomit. So it's not the best book to read if you have a bad stomach, but it talks about, and we'll get into it in a minute, so I shouldn't go too far, but it talks about how bad the meat packing industry was and how basically they would store meat on the floor at times and then cut it up, after it sat there and the floor was covered with mouse droppings and things like that, and gnawed by mice, and it's kind of nasty once you hear about it. So here's the first one. Jacob Riis. This is the guy we saw all the pictures from last week. There's his book, How the Other Half Lives. He's talking about the tenement houses in New York City. So we talked about him already. There's The Jungle. That's what I was just showing you. Unsanitary conditions in the stockyards and slaughterhouses of Chicago. And then another one, the work of muckrakers like these guys. Oh, sorry, we're not talking about Ida Tartabo. Basically, people are reading this stuff, and there's more than just these two. This is a new style of reporting that's kind of around for the first time during this time period. And so we're going to see progressives reading about this stuff and want to change things. It's kind of like the memes you see on social media where they're talking about something that's happening in our society that's bad. You know, it's like people are seeing that, they're going, huh, that sounds kind of messed up. Why are we doing that way? And so some people are acting to try to fix the problems. So we're going to see them promote laws to improve living conditions, public health, and schools. And they're going to urge government to regulate business. So this is going to go against that laissez-faire, approach. Okay, so important goal is to improve lives of poor people in the cities. That's going to be a big thing because poor people in the cities, you saw those tenement houses, they were just dirty and nasty and, living in filth and with just overcrowdedness, it was bad. So one way was a settlement house, and Jane Addams was the main person who did this in Chicago, and then people looked at her model around the country and copied it. A lot of the things they did was they provided stuff for the poor. One of the big things is English for immigrants. When people came to our country, they were kind of expected to learn English. They couldn't use Google Translate. We didn't have Press 2 for Spanish. So you were expected to learn English to assimilate into American society. So that's one of the things that they taught immigrants. They're going to have art classes. They're going to have class in childcare. And a lot of them are going to actually offer childcare so people can go to work and offer food and stuff like this and shelter. Another thing, we're going to see the child labor laws come into effect. And this Florence Kelly is going to be big on this. And we're going to see the U.S. Children's Bureau start in 1912. And that's going to be a big deal because before this, kids are going to work as early as like 7 years old. Could you imagine going to work, like full-time work, not like, you're going and helping somebody out somewhere. 7, 8, 9 years old, going and having a full-time job, totally different world. So people had to grow up a lot quicker than we do today. I don't want a 6-year-old kid doing anything like that. Let them be kids. Enjoy that time period. So this is a big thing that changes, and we're going to see less and less kids like in this picture right here. And since kids are going to stop working so much, if you look at both of these charts, we're going to see the rise in children enrolled in public school go up and the children employed go down. So, that directly affects kids not going to work. If they're not going to work, they're going to school, so they're becoming more educated. And we're going to see our country become more educated as a result of this. All right, because a lot of children didn't, before this, when they're working, they don't see any benefit in education at all. I'm just going to go work and do this, and that's my only choice in life, where education gives you more choices to do more things. All right, so we're going to see also the highest rate of industrial accidents. Okay, you see these guys here with no legs. There's going to be a lot of long hours. These guys are usually working minimum 60-hour weeks. There's not any overtime. If it's an outdoor job, you're working longer during the summer. You're usually working from sun up to sundown. They're getting as much as they can from you. A lot of these places have poor ventilation. And this is a big deal for a lot of industries like the cloth making industry, because all these fibers are going through the air and basically people are, okay, I had to go because of our other class. These fibers are through the air and they're not able to breathe, and it's causing like cancer down the road for them. Plus, they're running things by coal. So you're breathing in that, coal smoke a lot of times. So that's the fumes. Unsafe machinery. There's not like a stop guard, a safety guard, and people are losing their hands. Okay, so each year more than 30,000 workers died on the job, while another 500,000 are injured in a year. When these guys don't have any kind of services to protect them. So that's a big thing. Okay, in the government, we're also going to change things to try to make it more for the person and not the political party. Because as you'll read in the reading today, the political parties were really becoming corrupt, and they're taking control of almost every aspect of our lives. Okay, kind of the government part of our lives, kind of like today too. So that's kind of something we need to take away as well, in my opinion. But I'm just a guy talking onto a computer screen. One of the things was a direct primary. This is how we get candidates onto a ballot. Before it went just to the political party themselves and they chose the person. Now the political party chooses a few people from their party and then the people elect that person to go to run in the election. So it's a little bit better, but it's still the political parties are basically saying, these are your choices. Pick one of them. And they're normally, you pick the one that they want you to pick. So it's not this has not changed that much. And the other three things, a couple things. One is the initiative. Gives people the power to put a proposed new law directly on the ballot. So this is putting a law there as the people, just like I said earlier. And these are the three things I explained earlier. The referendum allows citizens to approve or reject laws passed by the legislature, and the recall allows voters to remove public servants from office before their terms ended. So these are all things, like I said, I talked about all these earlier. They'll be in the reading as well. The reading's kind of long today. Sorry about that. Okay, that's it for today. I mean, hopefully you got if you need any, like I said, this is more government stuff, so I'm not going to go into it too much. It's pretty self-explanatory. So I don't that much. Okay, so your interactive notebooks, you're going to do these things again. I think you have 6 of them. Progressive, Muckraker, Settlement House Initiative, Referendum Recall. Okay, so the reading today, 212 to 220. Okay, it's not, I did it already today once. It's long, but it's not that long. Okay, answer the following questions. So for this one, what problems did progressive reformers hope to solve? I put in the bullets for you. Oops. So, I'm in this other mode, that's why. So when you type in your answer, you can just type this problem, enter, this problem, enter, and it'll bullet it for you. So that should be easy enough. The role the journalists and writers play, progressives, how they work to help the urban poor. So kind of what methods do they use? How did progressive reformers change local and state governments? And that goes to that last part about the referendum and that kind of thing. And then read the excerpt from the Jungle on 220, answer these couple questions, and that's it. Okay, so there's a decent amount of homework tonight, not a lot. There's more reading than anything else. All right, so I think the reading should allow you to answer all those questions and really supplement what I talked about even more. It gets in a lot more detail than I did for sure. Different muckrakers and, talks about Ida Tartabell and the other stuff that John Green talked about will continue as this whole class gets on. We'll get into almost all of it. All right, so Ryan, if you don't have any questions, that's all I have for today. Sorry I talked so long. I don't like talking that many periods of time without something in between. You'll see in the future, I'm going to break up classes a little bit more as I get into my stuff and then future people's units as well. All right, so any questions, Ryan?
Oh, no, sir. Sorry, I was getting donuts.
Okay, well, then that's it. So you're free to go. You have a great
Have a good day.
Stay warm.